That morning should have been the beginning of everything I had worked for. I woke up before sunrise, not because I was nervous, but because I was prepared. My final interview for a prestigious international company was scheduled for 10:00 a.m., and I had treated that time like sacred ground for weeks. I had rehearsed answers until my voice stopped shaking. I had studied the company's values, their recent projects, even the interview panel style based on LinkedIn research. This was not just an interview to me. It was an escape, a doorway, a life I had been building in silence. I ironed my clothes carefully, laid out my documents in a neat folder, and checked everything twice. Resume, ID card, portfolio link, certificates, everything was ready. My heart was steady. I wasn't lucky, I was prepared. Then came the first crack. My mother knocked on my door and told me almost casually that I needed to attend my younger sister's brunch event. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, but she wasn't smiling. "It's important for family reputation," she said firmly. "Many relatives will be there. You can miss one interview." My stomach tightened. "I can't miss this," I said. "This is my final round. If I don't show up, I'm out." My father walked in next, already dressed for the event, as if the conversation was over before it started. "Don't exaggerate," he said. "Jobs come and go, family doesn't." Those words hit harder than I expected. I tried again, explaining the timing, the opportunity, the importance. I even showed them the email with the interview schedule. But they weren't listening. Or maybe they were listening and simply didn't care the way I needed them to. My sister appeared in the hallway wearing a new dress, excited and glowing like the world revolved around her brunch. She barely looked at me. "Just come for a few hours," she said lightly. "It's not a big deal. Not a big deal." That phrase stayed in my chest like a stone. Without warning, my mother took my documents from the table, claiming she was keeping them safe, so I wouldn't forget anything. My phone was suddenly placed on silent by my father, so there wouldn't be distractions. Everything I needed to leave on time was slowly being taken away under the disguise of concern. Minutes turned into delays. Delays turned into panic. When I finally managed to get out of the house, the streets felt different, too slow, too heavy, like time itself was working against me. I kept checking the clock again and again, my heart racing faster than my footsteps. But deep down, I already knew. I was going to be late. By the time I reached the interview location, the building doors were closed for candidates. The security guard shook his head before I even spoke. "You're not allowed in. Session has started." I stood there for a moment, frozen, holding a folder full of preparation that suddenly meant nothing. My phone buzzed, one email notification. I already felt what it would say before I opened it. "We regret to inform you that your absence at the final interview stage has resulted in your disqualification." The world didn't collapse loudly. It collapsed quietly. No one around me noticed. Cars passed. People walked. Life continued normally while mine stopped. I went back home without saying a word, and when I walked through the door, I saw the brunch still going on. Laughter, music, clinking glasses. My sister was taking pictures, smiling like nothing had happened. My parents were talking to guests, proud and satisfied. Not a single person asked me how it went. Not a single person cared that something inside me had just broken beyond repair. That day, I understood something I would never forget. In my own home, my future was optional, but my sister's brunch was mandatory. After that day, something in me changed in a way I couldn't explain to anyone, because no one in my house ever asked. There were no conversations about the interview I missed, no apology, no acknowledgement, just the same routine continuing as if nothing had happened. My sister kept posting pictures from her brunch like it was the most important event of the year. My parents proudly showed them to relatives, laughing about how beautiful everything had been. And me, I became invisible in my own home. At first, I tried to speak about it, not angrily, just honestly. I told my mother how important that interview was. She responded with a tired sigh, like I was being dramatic. My father said I should stop dwelling on small failures. My sister didn't even look up from her phone. That was the moment I stopped trying to be understood, because I realized something painful. They didn't see it as a loss. To them it was just my inconvenience, so I went silent. Not broken silent, strategic silent. I started rebuilding myself in ways they would never notice. While my house was loud with celebrations, I was learning quietly in my room at night. I took freelance projects online, small at first, almost meaningless payments that barely mattered financially, but meant everything mentally. Every project taught me something new: coding, communication, deadlines, client handling. I stopped sleeping early. I stopped asking permission. I stopped waiting for support that never came. When my parents saw me on my laptop late at night, they assumed I was just wasting time. They never asked what I was doing, and I never told them, because I knew if I told them my goals, they would find a way to slow me down again. Months turned into a year, then 2, while my sister lived a life of social events, cafes, and constant attention. I lived a life of discipline and repetition. There were nights I felt exhausted beyond logic. Nights I questioned if I was chasing something pointless. But every time doubt appeared, I remembered that locked interview door and the email that ended my chance. That memory became my fuel. I started applying to companies outside my country. Rejections came fast at first, hundreds of them. Each rejection felt like another reminder of how far I still was from where I wanted to be. But I didn't stop. I improved. I learned from every failure like it was homework. Slowly, things began to shift. One response turned into an online assessment. One assessment turned into a virtual interview. One interview turned into an offer, not big, not glamorous, but real. My first international contract job paid me less than I ever expected, but it gave me something far more valuable: identity. I was no longer just someone whose future had been interrupted. I was someone rebuilding it, and I kept that part of my life completely hidden from my family. At home, I played the same role I had been pushed into: quiet, unimportant, overlooked. My parents rarely asked about my work, and I never volunteered information. My sister barely noticed me unless she needed something small like internet help or printing documents. But outside that house, I was becoming someone else entirely. Deadlines became routine. Communication became sharp. Confidence replaced hesitation. I started receiving better opportunities, better clients, better recognition. Every step forward felt like taking my life back piece by piece. Still, I never celebrated loudly. I didn't post. I didn't brag. I didn't even tell my family when I finally got accepted into a full-time remote position with a global company. I simply kept growing in silence because I had learned something important. In a place where your dreams can be taken away without warning, you don't announce your success, you protect it until it becomes unbreakable. Years don't announce when they change you. They just do it quietly until one day you realize the person you used to be no longer exists. That day came for me inside a glass, walled office I had never imagined I would step into when everything started falling apart. I was now part of a global company's hiring and expansion team. My role wasn't just technical anymore. I was involved in recruitment decisions, final interviews, and candidate evaluations for regional hiring. I had worked my way up slowly, proving myself through consistency rather than noise, and then I saw a name on the candidate list. For a moment, I thought it was a coincidence. Then I read it again. My sister, the same sister whose brunch had once been more important than my entire future. I didn't react immediately. Years of discipline had trained my face into calmness, even when my thoughts weren't calm at all. I kept scrolling through the file, reading her application like I had never known her before. Her qualifications were average. Her experience was minimal. Nothing about her profile stood out in a competitive pool, but none of that mattered in that moment. Because she was coming into my interview room, I requested no changes. I didn't remove her. I didn't delay her. I simply allowed the process to continue exactly as it was designed. The day of the interview arrived. I sat in the panel room, wearing the same expression I used for every candidate: neutral, professional, unreadable. My colleagues didn't know anything about my personal connection. I had made sure of that long ago. My life outside work stayed sealed behind silence. The door opened, and she walked in, confident at first, dressed neatly, smiling the way people smile when they believe they are about to be judged fairly. But then her eyes met mine. Everything in her expression shifted. Recognition hit her like a sudden drop in temperature. She froze for half a second too long. That pause said everything she didn't want to say out loud. I didn't change my expression. "Please sit," I said calmly, pointing to the chair. She sat down slowly, her confidence already shaken. The interview began. I asked standard questions at first: her experience, her skills, her understanding of the role. She answered, but not strongly. Her responses lacked depth, clarity, preparation. Every answer revealed something she hadn't taken seriously. Then came the harder questions: real scenarios, pressure-based situations, problem-solving under deadlines. She struggled, not because she wasn't intelligent, but because she wasn't prepared for the level of expectation she thought she could walk into. I watched carefully, not with anger, but with clarity. This wasn't personal anymore. This was reality. At one point, she paused mid-answer and looked at me, as if searching for something familiar in my face. Something from the past, something that could soften the moment, but there was nothing to soften. The interview ended. She walked out without knowing the result, but she already understood it. I submitted my evaluation like I did for every candidate. Objective, fair, unbiased on paper. But inside me, there was no confusion. She was not selected, not because I wanted revenge, but because the world I had built did not bend for the one who once broke mine. After the final list was released, she saw my name in the internal credits of the hiring panel. That was when everything became clear to her. The forgotten sibling was no longer behind the door. He was the one deciding who got through it now. A week after the interview results were announced, I expected the matter to end quietly. In my experience, most candidates moved on quickly, some disappointed, some determined, but all eventually accepting reality. But this time, reality came back knocking in a different way. It wasn't a formal complaint or escalation. It was a request. My sister had applied again, not for the same position, not as a candidate competing in the same pool, but for an internship under my department. A junior role, a learning position, something far below what she had tried for before. When I saw her application, I didn't feel surprise. I felt something closer to stillness, no anger, no satisfaction, no emotional storm, just the awareness. I approved it, not out of revenge, not out of pity, but because this time I wanted things to be real in a way they had never been in our family. When she joined, she didn't know I was directly overseeing her team. In fact, I made sure no one mentioned it. I didn't want special treatment given or assumed in either direction. She entered the workplace the same way everyone else did, through orientation, training, expectations, deadlines, and evaluations. At first, she tried to act confident. She spoke in the same tone she used at home, slightly entitled, slightly casual, as if mistakes could be overlooked with charm. But the workplace didn't respond to charm. It responded to performance. Slowly, that confidence began to shift. She started missing small details, receiving feedback she wasn't used to hearing, being corrected not harshly, but consistently. The kind of correction that doesn't insult you, but doesn't comfort you either. And for the first time in her life, she was not surrounded by people who adjusted reality for her comfort. Meanwhile, I treated her exactly like everyone else. No favoritism, no humiliation, just professionalism. And that in itself became the hardest part for her, because she realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't reacting to her anymore. I was evaluating her. Days turned into weeks. She improved slowly, not dramatically, but noticeably. There were moments when she stayed late to fix her mistakes, moments when she asked questions she never used to care about, moments when she stopped expecting shortcuts. One evening, she stayed behind after others had left. The office was quieter than usual, only the hum of computers and distant city lights outside the glass windows. She walked toward my desk. For a moment, she didn't speak. Neither did I. Then she finally said it softly, almost broken in tone. I didn't know it mattered that much that day. I understood exactly what she meant without her needing to explain. She was talking about the brunch, about the interview, about everything that had been dismissed as not important. I leaned back slightly, looking at her not as a sister in a home that no longer felt like one, but as a person standing in the consequences of choices she never thought would return. I know, I said quietly, that's the problem. Silence filled the space between us, not heavy, not dramatic, just real. After a moment she nodded. No excuses this time, no defensiveness, just acceptance. Weeks later, she came again, not for conversation, not for explanation, but for something simpler. An apology. It wasn't loud or emotional. It wasn't dramatic like movies or stories. It was just honest. I was wrong, she said. I didn't understand. I looked at her for a long moment. Not because I needed to forgive, but because I needed to acknowledge something in myself. I wasn't the same person who had stood outside a closed interview door years ago. That version of me had long disappeared in silence and effort. You understand now, I said finally. That's enough. She nodded and walked away lighter than she came in. That night, I stayed alone in the office for a while longer. The city outside glowed quietly, unaware of any personal victories or losses. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was carrying the past on my shoulders. I realized something simple but powerful. Revenge hadn't been the goal. It had just been the path I accidentally walked while trying to rebuild myself. And in the end, success, not destruction, was what gave me peace.